Our scripture this morning is from Matthew 13:45 to 46. The kingdom of heaven is like a man, a merchant, seeking fine pearls. On finding one pearl of extremely great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it.
Good morning, IUCC family. My name is Craig Turrell. If you don't know me, I've been a proud member here at IUCC for the last 15 years. And when I heard Pastor Sarah was doing a Broadway series, I jumped at the opportunity to be able to speak with you this morning because I love musicals. My life is a musical. The challenge was to find one musical when I have so many favorites. But ultimately, I decided on Stephen Schwartz's Godspell, first released in 1971. The year I was born, I took that as a sign. I will admit here from the outset today that my message is tangentially at best correlated with the musical. But we've enjoyed its amazing music this morning. We've seen its sense of play. And as I will explain later, it is a musical that holds a very special place within my heart. If you don't know the show, it is simply the Jesus story retold once again. It's really the story of the disciples and the community that they form after they befriend man Jesus. The plot is the passion narrative conjoined with the parables. And these parables, they get reenacted by the ensemble in this wonderful childlike sense of play. We saw it in Fresh Word this morning, straight out of Godspell. It's the parables, though, today that organize my thoughts. It's the parable of the pearl of great price that I want to speak on this morning. But before we get to that pearl, I'd like to share a little personal history, a little background. All of us approach the parables with our personal histories. Mine began 50 years ago in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I was born to a loving, kind, strict family, but they taught me, progressive family, but they taught me I could be anything that I wanted. I could follow my dreams and just work hard to realize them. But as a gay man growing up in the Bible Belt, I had to run away from home, both figuratively and literally. So at the age of 18, I moved to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and enrolled in the Richard Stockton College of New Jersey as a philosophy undergraduate. Along the way as a philosophy undergrad, I was tasked at some point to read the 5th century theologian St. Augustine of Hippo, his Confessions. And in reading his I was deeply moved at the time. I had a spiritual awakening of sorts, to such an extent, by the time I graduated, I was convinced that I wanted to live in religious life, in religious community, as an Augustinian friar. So I enrolled immediately into a master's program in theology at Villanova University, an Augustinian university, and I began that formation process. But 2 years later, I graduated, and I had one of those moments taking a shower where it just dawned on me. I really didn't like religious life. I didn't really like the academic rigors of theology and philosophy. The vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, they no longer held sway over me because I began to consider the possibility of a relationship. A relationship could mean with somebody of the same sex. So I left the Augustinians. But then I found myself the wise old age of 24, with 2 degrees in hand, going out into the world, looking for signs in the window that said, philosopher, theologian, apply within. I'm reminded of another song, great song from one of my favorite musicals, Avenue Q. What do you do with a BA in English? Uncertain of my future and the direction of my life, I retreated into the world of the familiar, the world of restaurants. I began work in restaurants at the age of 15. I have cooked, I've cashiered, I've waited tables. I know restaurants like the back of my hand. So I took this job in a coffee shop as a barista in Center City, Philadelphia in the summer of '96 to figure things out. But by the end of that summer, I was asked to manage this coffee shop, not realizing at the time that I was embarking on a 15-year career in restaurant management. From an independent operator to corporate chains to my own business. And it wasn't long before I was saving steadily in my 401k, driving the car that I wanted, well on my way to the pursuit of the American dream. But by the age of 30, my heart began to grow restless. I was giving everything that I had within me to restaurants, my energy, my time, my passions. It began to wear on me because I grew worried that the epitaph on my tombstone was going to read, "He made a good steak." This quiet whisper within my heart was suggesting something else. I wasn't fulfilled there. So in response to this quiet whisper of my heart, and in search of a modicum of grace, I found myself at the age of 30 enrolling in a beginning ballet class at Saddleback Community College. Found myself at the bar with my two left feet, completely unaware of the difference between a tendu and a plie, surrounded by 20 to 30 young women going, "What the heck have you got yourself into now, Craig?" But I stuck with it, and it wasn't long after that I took my first singing class, and then I took my first acting class. And slowly, over this decade called my 30s, the world of performing arts was opened up to me. I did my first show, The Pirates of Penzance. But there was another voice inside my head at the same time that was telling me I'm not talented enough. I'm too old. Everybody else has got a head start. You'll never be able to make a career at this. You'll never be able to financially support yourself. Stick with restaurants. That's what you do best. To quote Guys and Dolls, "Sit down, you're rocking the boat." Well, despite these voices of fear, doubt, and self-loathing, that quiet whisper in my heart persisted. And in ways magical and ways marvelous, doors of opportunity were opened up to me. The right people at the right time were there offering encouragement and support. And slowly but surely, the impossible became possible. And so it was at the age of 40 that I cashed in those 401ks. I left the restaurant industry and re-enrolled for graduate school for a second time to earn an MFA in acting. And to make a long story short, theater completely transformed my life. I've said that many times. So this parable today. The kingdom of heaven is like a man, a merchant, who is seeking fine pearls, but upon the discovery of one of great value, he sells all that he owns to buy it. There is a tendency sometimes when we look at parables to look for the easy and simple interpretation. And that simple and easy interpretation often turns out to be the traditional interpretation. So along those lines, we might think at first glance that this parable is about discipleship, a model or a metaphor for discipleship. We've got a person seeking one thing, but at great sacrifice finds something of greater value. And what is that greater value? This pearl of great price, symbolic for a life with Jesus, a relationship with God, the spiritual life. You'll often hear this pearl of great price referenced as the Christ pearl. Now the problem here is that's the simple and easy interpretation. And I remember from my days at Villanova, and I remember from Jewish scholar Amy J. Levine, who spoke here several years ago, and whose exegesis I am drawing upon heavily today in her wonderful book, Stories About Jesus. Parables are not easy. They're the opposite. They're meant to challenge us, to take us outside our comfort zones, to make us think about ourselves and the world that we live in, and that there is always a shocking quality to them. So let us take a moment to dig in and understand the historical context of this parable, to understand just a little bit the Koine Greek of the New Testament, and see if we can put ourselves in the shoes of a first century follower of Jesus in search of that shocking quality. Kingdom of heaven is like a man. In Greek, it's anthropos, a human being, much more inclusive. Please forgive me for the gender-specific language today. It's like a human being, a merchant. Now, a merchant today means something quite different than it meant back then. I could call up my mom and dad and be like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, guess what? I am dating a merchant, and I would like to bring him home to dinner to meet you." And they would be, "Oh, really? How exciting. What's he sell?" A buyer trader of goods. Now, a merchant in Greek is emperos, emperoi for plural. And the Bible is an unsavory individual, living a sordid lifestyle, unscrupulous in their actions, Merchants are those for whom money, power, and self-interest take center stage. How do we know this? Well, let's look at the Greek and trace it through the Bible. It is the emperoi, or merchants, tied to the whore of Babylon in Revelation. It is the merchants or emperoi that Jesus drives from the temple for having turned his father's place into a den of thieves, into an emporium. It is the merchants or emperoi that buy Joseph into slavery from his brothers. Human beings concerned with money, power, and self-interest. Kingdom of heaven, that's that guy. That's where our parable starts. Already so much more interesting. Now he is seeking fine pearls. There's nothing to suggest that he's seeking a moral or ethical code to live by, or that he's searching for a walk with Jesus. No, it is a luxury item that few people could afford, worth more than rubies. But upon the discovery of one of great value, of great price, he sells all that he owns to buy it. Now there the Greek is clear. He divests of himself, financially speaking, of materialistically speaking. The Greek does something also interesting there that I like to take note of. He gives of his life spirit, of his bios as well. In its purchase, he is no longer a merchant. He becomes something new. We'll come back to that. So how might we locate ourselves in this parable today? I'm reminded of the great philosopher of myth and world religions, Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell spoke of your bliss. You must find your bliss. Bliss, ultimate joy, ultimate happiness, purpose, contentment. The problem, according to Campbell, though, is our bliss is elusive. It must be found. But until you find your bliss, life is never quite on track. It's off, out of the groove. It's skews slightly. There's an existential angst because we have this awareness that somehow things are not in alignment. We must find our bliss. But so often it's the case we don't find our bliss because we are busy seeking fine pearls, money, power, and self-interest. We chart career paths solely for the sake of money. We chart career paths to keep others happy, to keep our parents happy. We find ourselves in career paths that we settle in, that go on day after day after day after day after day, slowly, surely sucking every ounce of our soul from us. We seek fine pearls in sex, drugs, and alcohol, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, fame and fortune and friendship. Our pearl of great price, our bliss, remains that buried treasure just beyond reach, just beyond our grasp. Now for the challenging part, the shocking part of this parable. He finds one of great value, of great price. Here, Amy Jill Levine offers, for me, a quite profound possible interpretation. It has a corollary in existentialist philosophy that I wish I had time to expound on, but I won't. But I find it profound. She says that pearls may have something to say of creativity, of the natural world, that we have in the lowliest of organisms, a living organism, an oyster, the ability to create something of itself, something magnificent, something wonderful, something beautiful. This pearl of great price found by this merchant. Nobody else has seen it. Nobody else has touched it. Nobody else understands its meaning. He alone understands its value. He alone recognizes its beauty. He alone determines its meaning. The pearl of great price is a choice. A choice born of him, through him, with him. This merchant, they, turns away from a life of money, power, and self-interest, becomes willing to invest of themselves, of their financial well-being, of their life spirit, in order to create something wonderful, something beautiful, something magnificent. And in that supreme, radical self-choice of self-creation, reinvents themselves new. The question of our pearl of great price, our bliss. Doesn't matter how old you get, it is a question standing before all of us, demanding an answer. So how do we find our pearl of great price, our bliss? Here I can only offer my own faith experience. There is a quiet whisper in your heart. It is gently nudging, gently tugging, always there, quietly suggesting possibilities, suggesting the impossible, suggesting choices. It can often be overpowered by the bedevilments of fear, doubt, and self-loathing, but it will persist. You must hear it, acknowledge it, cherish it, value it, honor it, meditate with it, pray with it, breathe into it. Godspell was the first show that I ever directed. Didn't know that I wanted to be a director until, again, graduate school, second time in my 40s. And I remember at the time I was just marveled because all of a sudden I got to use this theology training from my 20s. My restaurant skills to be a good manager were the same things I needed to be a good director. And my acting training finally made sense in a way that I wanted to use it. And this collaboration was transformational. It changed my life. It was a profound experience for me. And as an ensemble and as a creative team, we coined a new verb at the time, to Godspell something, to cast a spell, to sprinkle a little fairy dust, to put some magic out there, to spread and sprinkle love, compassion, warmth, imagination, creativity, to put it out there in the world. We wanted to Godspell our audience. We had Godspelled each other throughout the rehearsal process, and the show left me forever Godspelled. In closing, here I am now, a man in my 50s, and the quiet whisper of my heart has been speaking to me again. It's been speaking for some time. It began speaking 30 years ago, but I've ignored it. And it spoke louder when I joined this church 15 years ago, but I've been ignoring it. And of late, it's been speaking a little louder, and it's today that I choose to acknowledge it. That voice has been telling me that I want to preach. I want to preach. But I've been too scared to ask. Scared to ask Paul. Scared to ask Dave. Scared to ask Sarah. Sarah gave me a little door of opportunity on Father's Day, and I was like, boom, I'll take it. She didn't even know what I was doing, but I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. Because I've been too scared to ask. There it was. Scared because I'm not ordained. Scared that one of you might stand up and walk out and send in an email to the office tomorrow saying, what the heck is he doing up there? But that whisper is there, and over 15 years, you, as my family, have Godspelled me. And it is my hope that I might Godspell you. Vocations do indeed exist. There is a calling for your life. There is something you alone can do. Your heart is whispering. That is my Godspell message for you this morning. Amen.